Good evening. Welcome to AC Transit's Transit Talks. My name is Beverly Green, Executive Director, External Affairs, Marketing and Communications at AC Transit. Transit Talks is an opportunity for AC Transit's leadership team to share community updates on bus service, who we serve, and our plans for the future as we all navigate our way out of this pandemic. Our agenda for the evening is simple. We will hear opening remarks from members of the AC Transit Board of Directors. We will then move into a presentation of approximately 45 minutes, which will be delivered by key members of the AC Transit team. We will have 3 live polls sprinkled throughout the evening to help us understand how you are thinking about your future travels to and from work, school, or other activities. Next, I would like to introduce 2 AC Transit Board members that are in attendance tonight, Diane Shaw and Chris Peoples. Director Shaw was elected to the AC Transit Board of Directors in November 2018 to represent Ward 5, which includes the cities of Fremont, Newark, and the western part of Hayward. Diane Shaw is a lifelong user of public transit, regularly riding the Dumbarton Express from the Fremont, Newark to San Carlos. Ms. Shaw is a retired information technology manager for the San Francisco County Transit District. She is a member of the American Public Transportation Association, and she was also a member of the Mayor's Fremont Mobility Task Force. She is a member of that. Well, she was a member of that, which concluded in 2019, contributing to laying the groundwork for the creation of the Fremont Mobility Commission in 2020. Ms. Shaw is also a lifelong community volunteer. She brings to the board a wealth of knowledge in the transportation field and public service. Also with us is Director Chris Peoples. Director Peoples was appointed by the AC Transit Board of Directors in November of 1997 and was elected in 1998 and re-elected 6 times since then. He serves as one of the 2 at-large directors. I will now turn the microphone over to Board Director Diane Shaw for a few remarks, and she will be immediately followed by Director Peoples. Director Shaw?
Thank you, Beverly. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us. I know you're all busy, and I appreciate you carving out some time to hear from us, and I hope you find that it's a productive use of your valuable time. I also want to generate a warm welcome because Assembly Member Alex Lee has joined us. I see he is on the call, and so it's good to see you, Alex. Thank you for joining. Once again, my name is Diane Shaw, and I am your representative for Ward 5, which is at the Fremont and Newark area. My colleague, Director at Large Chris Peoples, and I sit on the board with 5 others who are elected by the communities we serve, and our role is to govern AC Transit on behalf of the public and the users of our bus network. As a board member, you will all often find me at a bus transit stop or bus transit centers, BART stations, asking our riders how it's going and checking in with city leaders to better understand the needs so that I can make sure that I'm a good advocate for you. I ran for the AC Transit Board because I thought we can do better for transportation options in South County. We are a little different from other cities within the AC Transit network as we are more suburban, which has different challenges. And yet we are becoming more urban at the same time. Residents and city officials are more informed today, I think, about our service, but we still have a lot of work to do working together. Since COVID, we've all had a little break from the congestion on the roads, but as a lot of you have seen, that congestion is quickly coming back. I'd like to see more people using other modes of transportation besides the car to help relieve some of that congestion. I'm especially interested tonight in hearing from people who used to take the Transbay bus service from Fremont, Newark into the city. That service has been suspended, and we need to know how many people are interested in bringing it back as an option to go to San Francisco. There are some exciting new projects coming our way in the fairly near future. The city of Fremont has started working on the Complete Streets project in Centerville, which will include adding signal priority so that the buses will have priority as they travel down that corridor. That, along with the new bike and pedestrian walkways, will make that a much more friendly neighborhood for using options other than a car. They are also working on improving the Dakota Corridor, which was the corridor I used to use a lot, going to the Dumbarton Bridge, which includes a bus-only lane to speed up bus service going across the bridge. We partner well with both Fremont and Newark, and I look forward to doing more joint projects with them that could help our cities provide more mobility options. We also need to hear from our riding public, though, and that is why sessions such as these are so important. Your feedback is extremely important to us, and I look forward to hearing it. It's been a difficult year for everyone, including AC Transit. The pandemic has impacted revenue and ridership at a level never previously seen. I am hopeful that the new administration's commitment to ensuring we have long-term sustainable funding in place to support public transit nationwide. We are on the road to recovery, I believe, and my colleagues will be sharing what AC Transit is doing to recover from the pandemic and navigate a path forward. Thank you again for your time. I'll now turn it over to my fellow board member, Director at Large, Chris Peoples.
Thank you, Diane. Somehow my video isn't working. Thank you, Diane, and thank you all of you for coming this evening to hear about what AC Transit is doing. As Diane said, I'm one of the 2 at-large board members, and during various election cycles, when there were some issues down in Fremont and Newark, I essentially was the director for Fremont and Newark for a while. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have Diane on our board. She brings a wealth of experience in transportation, both in the private sector with United Airlines and in the public sector with Samtrans. And she's a wonderful addition to our board. In addition, she has extensive experience in various nonprofits in Fremont and Newark. And so she knows a whole lot of people. There we go. She knows a whole lot of people down there and is very well plugged into the community. And as she indicated, she spends a lot of time at bus stops and BART stations trying to figure out what people want. And that's wonderful. It's sort of a long meeting tonight, but it's going to be quite interesting. And I particularly call your attention to some of the discussion by our planning director, Robert Del Rosario. One of the things that we're doing as we come out of this pandemic is trying to see what the long-term implications are for transportation and land use, and whether that requires a rethinking of our network. And between now and June of 2022, there's going to be a whole set of public meetings. So I would encourage you to look out for those and go to those. But anyway, welcome, and I will turn it over to our great general manager. I've served with 5 of them since I've been on the board, and Mike Hurst is by far the best. So Mike, it's yours.
Director Peoples, thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you, Director Shaw and Peoples, for your remarks. I wholeheartedly echo what Director Peoples said. Director Shaw, it's a pleasure to have you on the board, particularly with your transportation and particular transit knowledge. I am Mike Hurst, the general manager at AC Transit. I've been over here a little over 5.5 years. Before I get into my presentation, I just want to thank the frontline AC Transit employees. This has been an incredibly difficult time, and our employees have responded heroically, from bus operator to mechanic to the folks that clean our facilities and our buses, field supervision. We knew that we had a very transit dependent and a population that very much depends on AC Transit. That has been proven more so now than ever. Our ridership, comparatively to other transit systems in the Bay Area, has not eroded the way we expected it to, because of that transit dependent population. We would not be able to serve those folks. I'll get into the numbers in a minute, but if it wasn't for our frontline essential worker employees that responded heroically and still do every day, I just want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for joining us tonight and for your continued support as we work to restore and rebuild service in the 13 cities, 8 unincorporated areas of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We pride ourselves as being the 3rd largest public bus system in California and 3rd largest transit agency in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our service is critical to the regional economy. Our Transbay service across the Bay Bridge, San Mateo Bridge, Dumbarton Bridge had surpassed 15,000 average daily riders before the pandemic, and was the service that had consistently shown year-over-year growth. And we were getting 30,000 students to school daily. Whether you ride, whether you're a business owner, an elected official, and even if you drive, I guarantee you that anything that impacts AC Transit in one way or another also impacts you. Prior to March of 2020, we carried approximately 189,000 weekday riders and more than 53 million riders annually. As of last week, our ridership is still down 60% compared to pre-pandemic levels. That's still about 62 to 65,000 people a day. Our Transbay ridership has been severely impacted due to people working from home and not commuting. But the pandemic will not last forever. And when the economy reopens, we will continue to play a critical role in the Bay Area's transportation network, connecting with 16 other public and private bus systems, 25 BART stations, 6 Amtrak stations, and 4 ferry terminals. And when Alameda's Seaplane Lagoon Ferry Terminal opens later this year, we will connect to that ferry terminal as well. While our overall ridership today is a fraction of what it was before the pandemic, we continue providing a critical service, in particular for those that have continued to ride during the pandemic. AC Transit has always been a lifeline for many, and our service has always been a critical component of the fabric of many communities. Ensuring the sustainability of AC Transit service is truly a matter of equity, given that 65% of our riders are low income and 75% are people of color. A rider survey conducted during the pandemic revealed that those still riding are dependent on our service. 40% are making essential trips to work, school, medical appointments, to get groceries, etc. 15% identified as essential workers. 43% indicated they don't have access to a car. Today, AC Transit's ridership is the second highest of any Bay Area transit agency, carrying more riders than BART on an average weekday and second only to Muni. During the pandemic, AC Transit staff has been hard at work every day, getting service on the road. Our frontline employees, those bus operators, mechanics, road supervisors, all the employees I mentioned have come to work every day getting essential workers where they need to go. And behind the scenes, AC Transit staff has been busy all year long on a variety of key projects, including Tempo, our bus rapid transit service. The first in the East Bay was launched in August 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. Tempo runs along a 9.5-mile route through the cities of Oakland and San Leandro, with 10-minute headways and buses traveling 80% of the route in a dedicated bus-only lane. We are seeing on-time performance levels of 84%. We've also implemented innovative technology to assist our riders. Our IT and marketing and communications departments have been focused on developing technologies aimed at improving the rider experience. This year, we launched our first ever official mobile app that offers real-time information. Where's your bus? When will it be there? A new contactless fare payment option using your phone. Access to AC Transit's customer service line, customer service, customer comment forms is available through the app. Additionally, we launched the new rider capacity feature, which offers riders real-time information about bus capacity levels. We are very limited because of the social distancing on our buses, but I'm happy to report June 7th, we will relax from 6 feet to 3 feet. That will improve the number of pass-ups. We are frustrated that we've been passing customers. We are working diligently to increase the capacity and operate shadow buses when we do know we have overcrowding. We launched a new website earlier this year and completed a full renovation of our customer service center in downtown Oakland, which is now open to the public. In March, AC Transit was named Employer of the Year by the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the Women's Transportation Seminar, known as WTS, in recognition of our commitment to the advancement of women in the transportation industry. In January, we joined the Clipper Start program, a pilot program offering a 20% discount to eligible low-income riders. March 1st, we launched an all-door boarding pilot on 2 lines, the 6 and the 51B, to help speed up boarding by allowing riders paying with Clipper to board and tag their Clipper card at the rear door, therefore speeding up the boarding process and improving reliability. In 2020, we introduced battery electric buses to our fleet, adding to our current zero-emission fleet of hydrogen fuel cell buses. And when federal and state officials announced they would establish a mass vaccination site at the Oakland Coliseum. We answered the call by providing free shuttle service, getting over 3,800 residents to their vaccine appointment. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, we remain committed to advancing projects to improve the rider experience and better serve our customers. We are already seeing evidence of change that is forcing all of us to plan and operate differently. And in AC Transit, we're doing just that, adjusting, innovating, doing our best to respond to the needs of riders as travel patterns continue evolving. Staff has prepared a couple of live polls tonight to receive instant feedback that will help our planners in their efforts to build a bus network that is responsive to the needs of our community. In fact, we have our first live poll right now. Can we get the first poll up on the screen? And for those of you on the phone, the question is, how will you travel once you return to work, school, or other activities? And the options are drive alone, carpool, ride public transit, bike, walk, take Uber or Lyft, what we call transportation network companies, or mix it up. And we've got a little countdown timer here, 35 seconds. Again, how will you travel once you return to work, school, or other activities? The choices are drive alone, carpool, public transit, use Uber and Lyft, bike, walk, or mix it up. Oh, interesting. Mix it up. 38% was the answer with the most results, followed at 31% by public transit. Thank you. We appreciate that. Looks like drive alone at 19%. No one is carpooling, and we've seen that in many of our transit talks. This is our 5th talk, and we don't see a lot of interest in carpooling. Looks like Uber and Lyft and walk tied with one responded each, or 6%. Very interesting, and we very much appreciate you participating. We'll have a few more of those live polls tonight. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to AC Transit's Acting Director of Marketing and Communications, Nichelle Lanes, who will speak about AC Transit's commitment to health and safety. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, General Manager Hurst. Good evening, Nichelle. I'm pleased to speak with you today about the safety measures AC Transit has in place to continue to provide you a safe ride. In accordance with state and county mandates, AC Transit has taken a proactive approach to ensure safety and wellness measures for riders and operators. I want to emphasize and remind everyone that AC Transit, since the beginning of the pandemic, has and continues to require face coverings while riding on our buses. To aid in this requirement, mask and hand sanitizer personal protective equipment, or PPEs, are available on every bus and refilled daily for our riders. Signage on every bus reminds riders to maintain a 6-foot social distance and to wear their face coverings correctly. Our buses are cleaned and fogged each day with a disinfectant. All operators currently use the positive airflow ventilation procedure implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. This procedure requires all windows to be closed, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or HVAC, on, and the rear roof hatch placed in the fully opened position. This pushes particulates through the roof hatch and refreshes onboard air 50 times an hour. Additionally, our maintenance department created a COVID shield for each bus. This latching shield encloses the operator for more protection from the spread of COVID-19. Finally, buses will have a COVID limit line on the floor near the operator to ensure a 6-foot distance between riders and operators. So one of the challenges of social distancing on buses has been a significant reduction in the rider loads we can typically carry. And the general manager discussed this. We are limited to about 25% of our normal bus loads currently, about 20 to 24 to 10 riders, depending on the bus type. As AC Transit complies with the CDC guidance on rider capacity, when our rider capacity has been reached, we must make the difficult call of not onboarding additional riders. We realize that with fewer seats available due to these social distancing requirements, Knowing the bus capacity levels as you plan your trip is a critical factor in successfully navigating our system in this unprecedented time and beyond. To that end, our innovation and technology team added a new feature to assist our riders within the ACT real-time bus arrival predictor. The general manager mentioned this in his slides. Our rider capacity feature enables riders to view real-time bus capacities by line. And on the screen, you'll see in the slide deck, the iconography to the right shows what it looks like on our ACT real-time predictors. Additionally, once a bus has reached its capacity, our operators reach out to our Operations Control Center, or OCC, to send out another bus to ease overcrowding. And now I'm going to turn it over to AC Transit's Chief Financial Officer, Chris Andrzejczyk, who will present on the topic, emergency funding for public transit.
Thank you, Nichelle. As she said, I'm Chris Andrzejczyk. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for AC Transit. I manage all aspects of the district's finances and make sure we have the funds we need to provide the essential service to the public that we serve. Tonight, I'll offer a high-level overview of AC Transit's financial condition and how we're getting through the pandemic. So our federal funding has been a lifeline to the district, but first off, I'd like to note that the funding we've received so far has replaced operating funds that we lost during the pandemic as ridership plummeted. It is not additional funding, it's emergency funding that has kept us afloat. AC Transit received $114 million from the initial pandemic CARES Act in the middle of last calendar year. We used $30 million to fill in revenue losses in our last fiscal year, and the remaining $84 million to fill in revenue losses for this current fiscal year. Looking at our next fiscal year, which starts in July, we don't think the economy will be back to normal, nor do we think our regular revenues will have returned in full for the beginning of this fiscal year. We will be using the second federal aid package, known as the CRISA Act, to fill in the $56 million in revenue losses we are projecting for this coming fiscal year. So again, the takeaway here is that we currently have been able to balance our budget to date, thanks to the federal aid we've received. Also, because we've reduced expenses and are providing, unfortunately, just 75% of the service we would normally provide. So prior to the pandemic, AC Transit was in a pretty good financial position. What has helped us in this pandemic is that we have a more diverse revenue source mix. We are funded by a combination of sales taxes, property taxes, fare box revenues, and bridge toll funds, which is different than many other agencies. Property owners in most of AC Transit service area pay $8 per month in parcel tax to support our essential service. We're extremely grateful to those voters that have continued to support this measure throughout the years. Stable funding like this has helped keep our revenues from dropping as much as other agencies, particularly those that depend on fare box revenues more than we do, such as Bart, Caltrain, Golden Gate Transit, and San Francisco Muni. The chart on the right shows the different revenue types from a selection of different agencies. And the point of this chart is not to read the numbers, but just to see that the different agencies in the region are all funded by a different mix of sources. And for those on the phone callers, or sorry, for those callers on the phone who can't see the chart, it's a very, very colorful bar chart that shows a different mix, as I said, different colors, different sizes of percentages of things for different agencies in the region. So it's hard to predict what will happen with the economy and transit ridership looking forward. What we are experiencing is not a normal recession. However, based on prior recessions, it could take a couple years before employment levels reach what they were before the pandemic. Since March of last year, many jobs have been moved from the office and into our homes. We are hearing and expecting that work from home and outside the office or workplace will continue to some degree for those that can, which will mean reduced Transbay and even local ridership. We are doing our best, but cannot control when people might return to transit, particularly if they have other transportation choices. We are fortunate and grateful for the 2 rounds of emergency federal aid to support our operations so far. This federal funding, as I noted, has been critical in stopping the bleeding, but has not made us whole. President Biden recently signed the American Rescue Plan Act into law, which will provide a 3rd round of federal aid. At this time, we do not know how much we'll be receiving. However, we do know that emergency federal aid is not likely to continue forever. So we must plan for a service level that we can support with our regular revenues once this federal aid runs out. Next, we'll talk about how we plan for future service. But before we do that, we have another poll for you to participate in. So this poll is asking how many days per week you will be commuting. And this is after the pandemic, or as we move into a more open region. And the answers are, I will work and attend school from home, 0 days, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 or more days, and I don't know. And what do we have? Okay, number 1 was I don't know at 27%, then 4 days and 5 or more days, both second with 20%, 0 days, 13%, and then a 3-way tie for 2 days, 3 days, and I will work or attend school from home with 7%, and nobody picked 1 day. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Michael Eshelman, our Manager of Service Planning.
Good evening. My name is Michael Eshelman. As Chris mentioned, I'm the Manager of Service Planning, and today I'm going to discuss with you our current and our future plans for service recovery as well as restoration. At the onset of the pandemic and shelter in place, AC Transit immediately reduced service to about 65% levels, which was Sunday service, because we experienced a pretty significant 74% drop in ridership, as well as concerns about the potential lack of available workforce, particularly in the bus operator ranks. Fortunately, due to federal funding, we were able to increase and sustain service levels at 75% in August 2020, as ridership also increased to about 40% of what it was before the pandemic. This increase was focused primarily on bringing back our trunk and major corridor routes, in particular to address pass-ups, to get those lines up to what they were pre-pandemic. We've also been able to make some recent minor additions, particularly with the start of some supplementary service school routes in response to the reopening of schools this spring. In addition to implementing those incremental service increases, we're also starting the planning and analysis for a full restoration of a new network. There's really 3 key factors to service recovery. The first is available funds. The second is available resources, and in particular, those are bus operators. And finally, there's really understanding ridership patterns. Chris already talked to you about an update on the budget and our financial situation. So next we have resources. We need to hire and train bus operators, along with all of the other operators in the region. We were really fortunate, and leadership made a really wise decision to not lay off staff, in particular, not lay off any bus operators. However, CDC guidelines and Cal OSHA regulations have limited the number of operators that we can train at any one time, literally the number of people that we can fit on a bus to train on routes and fit in the classrooms to train in person. We're also meeting, it's difficult to meet hiring demand in the region, as all the transit operators are all trying to pull from the same pool of folks to increase service as we recover. Finally, just as a district, we're exploring creative solutions to increase the operator throughput. We'll need to collect customer travel data via outreach, surveys, and other data sources that we may have access to regarding travel patterns. One of those might be cell phone data. We have a goal to implement a new service network that responds to the new normal by August of 2022, and I'll talk a little bit about that specific timeline later. Along the way, we plan to engage in robust outreach to inform the planning effort. That includes board approvals as well as the implementation process. I want to emphasize that these August 2022 targets are for a brand new route network. While that plan is underway, AC Transit will be able to reactivate the old network, suspended portions of the old network at some points, as funding and resources allow. In particular, with respect to South County, for June and mid-June, we're going to be reactivating line 215, as well as improving line 200 frequency to run every 20 minutes, which is higher than the pre-pandemic level of every 30 minutes. We also plan to bring back a vast majority of the school service, a question in the Q&A in August, if those schools fully reopen. Finally, we hope to start some pilots later this year. We want to try some new things and see how they work. That includes service to Seaplane Lagoon in Alameda, some service on Ashby Corridor in Berkeley, as well as extending line 60 from Chabot College to South Hayward Bart. In terms of our existing network, I'd like to share what's going on with the lines that serve the cities of Fremont and Newark today. Fremont and Newark are a large geographic area. They're part of our Special District 2 that focus on getting riders generally to and from BART, as well as to school and other really critical needs. We have some of the major lines here, the 99 along Mission, 200 along Fremont Boulevard, 210 as well, that are really form the trunk of the service area here. In general, the area is growing fast, and staff are looking at a major overhaul of the network in South County prior to the pandemic that would have taken service from every 30 minutes at best currently, as you can see, with a lot of routes every 60 minutes, to a network with service every 15 minutes or better on major streets. The work for that effort is being rolled into the service recovery plan for the whole system. This slide, as I mentioned before, we were going to talk a little bit about a more detailed overview of the service recovery timeline. This slide's a roadmap of how we plan to reach a new network plan as early as August 2022. The process will include multiple outreach points for information gathering, plan feedback, and implementation, with plenty of opportunity for plan development and revision in between. So we initiated this process with Transit Talks, this meeting series, to inform the public of our recovery status and plans as well as plans to seek public input. The first meeting was on April 26th, and we'll continue with the final meeting this coming Thursday, the 13th. In the fall, we plan to conduct another round of more in-depth outreach to get an idea of travel patterns as well as customer needs. So information from that outreach will feed our planning process and develop that new network that we're looking to implement in August. Once staff develops a draft new network proposal, we'll set a public hearing for final public feedback and engagement, with board approval slated for spring of 2022. If we have an approved plan by the board, we'll then commence public outreach to inform our riders as well as the public of the service changes that are scheduled for August of 2022. One key regional project AC Transit's been participating in is the Dumbarton Corridor Improvement Project. The Dumbarton Corridor is a key connection between the East Bay and Silicon Valley and is extremely congested, as we're all aware, especially pre-pandemic. Dumbarton Corridor is served by AC Transit Line U, Dumbarton Express Service, and Stanford's Line AEF, which all do kind of variations of the same thing. This project has really key three elements aimed at improving speed, travel time, and reliability, as well as ridership on transit service crossing the bridge. The first is traffic signals that are being equipped with transit signal priority that will allow transit vehicles to have better access to and through green lights. The second is that there will be signal queue jumps that will be installed that will give buses a head start in front of congestion. And finally, the project will include bus stop improvements that will make riding the bus safer and more attractive. The map on the right illustrates the project corridor and locations where improvements are planned. Construction is expected to start in the next several months. With that, I think we have another poll question. So let's see if we can help AC Transit set our priorities for the recovery. So what action should come first? Should we improve service to disadvantaged communities? Should we improve service on major transit lines where ridership is highest? Should we increase service to cover as much of the service area as possible? Or should we restore trans-based service? All right, I'm excited. So the number one response was improve service on major transit lines where ridership is highest. That had 35% of the respondents. Then next we have two ties. We have improved service to disadvantaged communities and increased service to cover as much of the service area as possible. So that's kind of this classic tension between putting service where most people ride it and putting service to make sure that everyone has a little bit of access to public transit. And finally, restore trans-based service at 18% of the vote. Thank you for participating in the live poll, and I'm going to turn the mic back over to General Manager Mike Hurst.
Thank you, Michael. I'll say the poll results were interesting there. The trans-based service response certainly didn't score as high as some of other transit talks. Good evening again. We really appreciate you participating tonight, particularly those polls are very helpful for us. We will be starting the Q&A portion shortly, but I'd like to share some project updates with you that are not related to the pandemic, but are important to our future operations. Since 2000, the year 2000, AC Transit has been building the most comprehensive zero-emission bus, or ZEB, program in the United States. Initially focused on hydrogen fuel cell technology, and most recently, as I previously mentioned, expanded to include battery electric buses, making our zero-emission program one of the most sophisticated programs in the country. Today, all of our zero-emission buses are prioritized to serve our most disadvantaged communities, which are also the most impacted by environmental factors. We're currently running a side-by-side comparison of hydrogen fuel cell, battery electric buses, and in addition to conventional diesel hybrid, and our older legacy fuel cell buses. The study will offer detailed comparisons of each technology's performance, reliability, fuel efficiency, capital, and operating costs. All transit agencies in California are required to operate a 100% zero-emission bus fleet by the year 2040. And in many ways, we're ahead of the curve compared to other agencies in the state. However, our challenge will be securing the funding needed to upgrade our facilities and build infrastructure needed to adequately accommodate a 100% zero-emission fleet. We currently have several corridor projects underway. Mike Eshelman did a great job talking about the Dumbarton there just a few slides ago. We're aimed at enhancing operations, improving service reliability along Telegraph, Grand, West Grand, San Pablo, and as mentioned, the Dumbarton Corridor. These projects include installation of transit signal priority, which was explained earlier, bus stop relocations, near side to far side. That means putting a bus stop on the across an intersection. It's safer for the bus, speeds up loading, keeps the bus better on time, prevents our buses from being stuck at traffic lights, and improve access to the curb, as well as ADA accessibility improvements. Lastly, we're actively engaged at the state legislative level to help advance legislation that prioritizes transit on our streets and highways. Former Assembly member, now Attorney General Rob Bonta, introduced a bill that will improve transit service into and out of San Francisco by installing a transit-only lane on the Bay Bridge. With Bonta's confirmation as State Attorney General, Assembly member Buffy Wicks has agreed to carry this bill. If passed into law, the bill will play an important first step in helping to improve the reliability of our trans-based service, which is frequently bogged down in traffic jams. Through the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force, AC Transit is working with other Bay Area transit agencies to coordinate our service planning, operations, communications, and a response to the pandemic. Most importantly, tonight, I wanted you to know we are hiring bus operators. If you could visit actransit.org/careers, our ability to restore service is somewhat limited by funding, but it's also limited by the number of operators that we can hire, train, and get behind the wheel driving time. We did have to stop hiring when the pandemic hit. We weren't sure what the financial outcome was going to be. Now we're confident. We have classes underway, and we're constantly looking for operators as well as other careers at AC Transit. This includes improving regional connectivity, improving the customer experience, particularly as it relates to travel on multiple systems, and focusing on equity to make sure the region's transit network is accessible and affordable to all. Again, that's some of the work we're doing on the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force. I'll conclude my remarks here and hand the mic over to Beverly Green to introduce the Q&A segment of Transit Talks. Again, thank you very much.
We recognize that was a lot of information, but we thought it was important to share this with you, not only the ways in which we have been impacted by the pandemic and our response, but also to highlight the other key initiatives that we have been focused on during the pandemic, all of which are aimed at improving service quality, reliability, and the rider experience. With that, we are now ready to transition to the question and answer portion of the program. This will go to Michael Eshelman from Planning. Will you be adding more buses to school routes, especially due to COVID when the schools open? Michael Eshelman.
Thank you very much, Beverly. Yeah, so what we're planning right now and what we've been doing, there's been a multidisciplinary effort within the district to get all of the school bell times and starting dates from all the school districts. We've gotten information from Fremont and Newark in particular. And so our plan is to bring back the service that we've had before to match those new school bell times and schedules. So we'll have a similar level of service for the school districts that we had pre-pandemic.
And we're aiming for August to implement that.
Sorry.
Super
Yeah.
critical. I appreciate Fremont and Newark for communicating, but for anyone on the call that's not from those school districts, we really need the information as soon as possible to program our schedules.
Thank you. This question goes to Michelle Lane. Are there any special services or fares for seniors?
Thank you. It's a really good question. There are a number of fares directly benefiting our senior and our disabled populations of riders. So we have we have senior fares, discounted fares for single ride in our passes, day pass, 7-day, 31-day. We have discounted fares for seniors and disabled community. We also have our regional RTC regional transit card that's valid on multiple transit agencies, and that's for verified people who either have a disability or are seniors. And we also have the Easy Pass program. And frankly, how the Easy Pass program works is a number of participants work through a client organization. If you are a part of an employer group, residential community, or a 2 or 4 year college. And a residential community could be, or an employer group could be, for example, a senior center, if a senior center qualifies for the number of participants in the program. And you would get deeply discounted fares on our Easy Pass program. And those Easy Passes are valid for anytime AC Transit is in service. So there are a number of ways for seniors to ride our service. I also want to add, if you're a senior who meets a certain threshold of income, there's also the Clipper Start program, which the general manager mentioned in his slide deck. You also would receive discounted fares if you're an adult and for some reason not eligible for a senior for a senior fare. But senior fare is the way to go if you're eligible.
Thank you, Nichelle. This is a question for Michael Eshelman of Planning. Could every bus stop have a covered bench for people, especially seniors, to sit while waiting?
That's certainly a goal to strive for. We currently have a shelter contract that allows us to place shelters throughout the district. In particular, what we look for are a couple of key things when we're placing shelters. The first is, can we place a shelter safely and there's ADA access to from the bus stop and around the shelter? So that's a key thing. Is the sidewalk wide enough to handle it? Also, there is advertising that pays for the shelter contract. And so they want the shelters on areas where there's going to be enough eyeballs to see the advertising. And another big thing is ridership, both the amount of it, but also the type. You know, as you mentioned, folks maybe with mobility disadvantages or seniors or other things might be eligible for a shelter placement over some other places. So this is something we're actively working on. We're going through renewing our shelter contract right now. And this is something we want to build into it, is an increase in the number of shelters that we have district-wide. And this is a good suggestion for how we should think about prioritizing bus shelters in the future.
Thank you, Michael Eshelman. This is a question for Chris Andrzejczyk. Why is there less service in South County compared to other AC Transit areas?
Thank you, Beverly, for the question. So most people may or may not know this. When AC Transit was formed, the original district went down to, this would be just north of Newark. And so at some point along the way, the voters in that district approved a parcel tax to fund transit service. At some point, Newark and Fremont were added into the AC Transit district overall, but the voters in Newark and Fremont have never approved a parcel tax to contribute to our funding.
Thank you, Chris Andrzejczyk. This is another question from Michael Eshelman of Planning. Was discontinuing of the Trans-Bay ridership the result of lower ridership?
It was, yeah. So the actual, when the shelter in place order went into effect in mid-March, we actually held on to the old Trans-Bay the pre-pandemic Trans-Bay network for about 2 weeks. And we saw ridership drop below 10% on those routes, as pretty much all the offices in downtown San Francisco in particular shut down. So we turned those services off. Generally, what we've seen is that office workforce hasn't returned, but we're keeping an eye on it. And we're looking to see when is the appropriate time to turn some of the Trans-Bay network back on as the commute patterns shift back to some people going into the office some of the time as we were trying to gather through that poll that we ran earlier.
Can I add a little bit to that, Michael? To put some numbers on that, as I mentioned in my talk, we were carrying over 15,000. When the full shelter in place happened, we were carrying on some days 200, 300, certainly on every day, no more than 400. So dramatic shift from that. The other thing we've tried to do is, as Bart cut their hours back, we saw many essential workers, folks that work nights, graveyard. So we did try to add back some service to cover for the hours that Bart is not providing. And as Mr. Eshelman said, we're watching very closely what the patterns are, not only for the white collar commuter, but also for the essential workers, those folks, service employees that are working odd hours. We hope to be able to continue to help that market as we get more federal aid and as ridership continually grows back.
Thank you, Michael Eshelman and Michael Hurst, General Manager. This question is for Nichelle Lanes. What are the different ways to pay my bus fare on the bus? Is it just cash and a Clipper card?
No, that's the short answer. No, it's not. You cash, Clipper card. Also, we have a couple of new contactless fare payment methods in addition to the Clipper card that were just launched actually during the pandemic. One is a mobile fare, a mobile ticketing fare payment system using your mobile device, usually your smartphone. You would be able, and you can access that from our official app, AC Transit official app. I want to do a plug for that. Or as well as some third-party apps like Transit app, and soon to be some other third-party partners. So right now you can pay for your cash fares and your passes, like a 7-day, a day pass, 31-day pass, not a 31-day pass, on mobile. We also, just 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, launched the Clipper solution on Apple for Apple iOS. You can also use a virtual Clipper card on your smart device and tag your device on Clipper readers and use that as well. So it's actually really exciting. We're looking for that same technology with our Clipper partners for Android, and we should be seeing that happen pretty soon.
Thank you, Nichelle Lanes. This is a question from Bart Board Director Liz Ames. How will you coordinate Bart service with, and this is for Michael Eshelman. How will you coordinate Bart service with AC Transit so there is the least amount of wait time to catch a bus or train? Often the 99 is not coordinated with the Dumbarton Express, but it is with Bart. Can we coordinate all schedules better?
Absolutely. I think that's something that we're working towards now. So we've heard loud and clear, especially during the pandemic, that the coordination, the timing of all the systems, the schedules kind of changed rapidly, really got off kilter. And so we want to make sure that we're coordinating better, and a big challenge, especially with something like the 99, which serves a number of BART stations, is which direction and which BART station are we timing the service to? And also throwing in the Dumbarton Express, how are we all coordinating everything together? So it's a big effort, but it's a regional priority through the Blue Ribbon Task Force. And so I think, this is something that we've heard loud and clear from our customers, as well as from regional leaders that we want to do more of. And so this is something that we're working on as a planning and scheduling group and as a district as a whole.
Thank you, Michael Eshelman. I also want to ask a question about Flex here, but before I do that, this is a question for Nichelle Lanes. And the way it reads is, why has AC Transit created what this person believes is an economic discrimination pricing system between Clipper card riders and cash riders, many of whom cannot afford a Clipper card? Similarly, the same type of economic discrimination has consistently over the past several years of fare increases cost more for cash payers going only on one round trip when you initiated your day passes. Can you speak to the difference between the discounted Clipper cards and cash and why that is, Nichelle Lanes?
Sure, I'm gonna tackle part of that, and maybe Andrzejczyk can tackle another sort of the longer term policy or strategy we have with Clipper versus with sort of maybe the inequities or the perceived inequities. So I'm going to talk about Clipper versus cash. So we do have a small discount between Clipper and cash riders, and that's mostly to encourage, it's a very modest discount, but it's mostly to encourage folks, if possible, to migrate from cash to Clipper. There are a number of advantages of using Clipper over cash, including discounts that aren't available for cash users, as well as some savings for the district that we can then cycle into service and other services with those discounts we receive from actually using Clipper and sort of reducing our cash handling costs. Having said that, we do have some options for those folks, and these are new options, and I sort of mentioned it and the GM mentioned it, but I want to really emphasize that Clipper Start, which is a pilot program that launched in January, is a new product that offers discounts for folks who meet certain income thresholds, live in the Bay Area. If you are within 200% of the federal poverty level, I encourage you to apply for Clipper Start. You will receive a discount that is similar to the discount you receive for Clipper versus cash. You'll also receive that discount with the other 20 transit agencies that are a part of Clipper Start. And you also won't pay for your Clipper card in that instance. So I think it's those variables or those benefits make it a great option for someone who may find transitioning to Clipper with the cash, with the adult fare, maybe problematic financially. I encourage you to look into Clipper Start. And then maybe Chris, you want to handle if there's more that you'd like to add on the back end.
Sure. Thank you, Nichelle. Just, as Nichelle mentioned, it is the district probably spends, about 4 to 5 times as much collecting cash fares as it does Clipper fares. So, the more Clipper fares that we have, the more money it saves the district to be able to provide service. And also, it's generally quicker for people to board the bus using Clipper. And the faster we can get people on and off the bus, the less time the bus has to wait at the stops, and generally the faster the service and the more on time we can be. So we'd like to get people on Clipper because it helps improve bus service in general.
Thank you, Nichelle Lanes and Chris Andrzejczyk. This is a question for the general manager. Can't we get more money for service from Biden's infrastructure proposal?
That's an interesting question. The way it's worded, more money for service is typically not allowed, but we expect to do quite well in the infrastructure bill for infrastructure. We have 4 divisions that are dated to the early 1970s that desperately need to be renovated and updated for our zero emission fleet. We have over a fleet of 540 buses that, as I mentioned earlier, eventually need to be replaced for zero emission. But we also have an incredibly friendly administration. President Biden, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg have been very vocal about how they want transit to be very focused, a priority in the infrastructure bill. The FTA administrator, whose confirmation hearing is tomorrow, I'm told, Nuria Fernandez, left Valley Transportation Authority from the Bay Area to take the secretary, or rather the FTA administrator position. And our vice president, Kamala Harris, is from the East Bay. So we have lobbyists in DC as well as in Sacramento, and we are working aggressively. We've already, for those of you that are not aware, earmarks are back. We've already submitted several proposals for earmarks. The question again asked if there's money for service, and that's one of my biggest frustrations. The earlier question about Clipper cards and you know, those that need assistance paying for transit, we've got to do better to find more operating dollars. That's where we'll be very active, not only at AC Transit, but the Bay Area Transit Operators, California Transit Association, American Public Transit Association, or APTA. We've got to find a more stable source for funding. Pre-pandemic, we were working on the mega measure that was to bring, if I recall, $40 billion to the Bay Area. We'd like to see something like that come back, likely in 2024. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, General Manager Hurst. This is a question from Michael Eshelman from Planning. Are there plans to bring back Newark Flex service?
So there's a short-term answer to that question, and there's a longer-term answer to the question. So in the near term, Flex is not one of the priorities that we're going to bring back between now and August 2020. What we are doing between now and August 2020 is this comprehensive planning and engagement process. And Flex is a key tool in our toolkit for how we want to build and adapt our service to the future of what the region needs. So what we want to do through this process is see where Flex fits in particular communities, which communities it serves best, where it works best, and where it can be rolled out or expanded or turned on or off throughout the communities that we serve through this engagement process. So we want to hear from the community about, do they want Flex? Do they not want Flex? What works? What are areas that are better served by it, or, you know, et cetera. And then through that whole planning process between now and August 2022, we can see where Flex fits into the district.
Thank you, Michael Eshelman. This is a question for Nichelle Lanes. How can I find out if a bus is going to be delayed?
We have some great ways. One is, and our primary way is ACT Real-Time. So ACT Real-Time is this online real-time bus predictor. It will let you know for the current bus that's coming up, as well as the 2 or 3 buses behind it, where it is, like along the route. You can see it visually where it is along the bus line, and you can also, it'll also tell you how many minutes or seconds it is to your stop. It happens, it pings like every 15 or 30 seconds. So it literally is happening real time. I use this ACT Real Time all the time. NL is my bus line, big pub for the NL. And it's really, really accurate. I can be in my office when I was here in the office and sort of plan how long it would take me to get to the bus stop and then how long it would take me to get to the bus. So that is a really key way. And while you're on ACT Real Time, I also encourage you to look at the rider capacity feature, which will not only tell you, you know, how long it is, whether your bus is delayed or not, but it'll also tell you if the bus is at capacity with our current social distancing measures. Now, when we move to 3 feet, obviously the rider capacity feature will change and adapt to reflect that new social distancing radius.
Thank you, Nichelle Lanes. This is a question from Terrence Grindell of the Newark Unified School District. The bus time to match the Newark Memorial High School bell schedule was packed pre-COVID. Will you add buses to allow social distancing? This is a question from Michael Eshelman.
That's a great question. It's something we're struggling with right now. So we have to plan all our schedules for August 2021 right now. And we kind of have to lock those in. So fortunately, we have all the bell time schedules for Newark Unified in particular, as well as all the other school districts we serve, that we are aware of the crowding on that particular school at those times. What we don't have is the ability to add any service right now beyond what we were providing pre-pandemic. So it's going to be a lot of dialogue between us and the school district and the parents and the individual school sites about what capacity we're capable of providing to each individual school site, provided social distancing or physical distancing requirements aren't lifted. So that's the real challenge, and I think we're going to be working together closely across the next few months to address that challenge.
Thank you, Michael Eshelman. This is another question from Bart Board Director Liz Ames. And I believe that this will probably be split between the general manager and also Nichelle Lanes. A private bus service takes employees to business parks from BART. To get more employees more connected to major employers such as the Amazon warehousing centers and others, can we partner with large employers and create a public-private partnership?
That's an excellent and very complicated question, Director Ames. I appreciate it. The short answer is we encourage major employers to use our Easy Pass program. Easy Pass essentially provides, extremely low cost access to our entire transit system. It's a benefit for the employer, it's a benefit for the employee, and it's a benefit for AC Transit. Now, on the private shuttle side, our first concern is the working conditions for those that operate that system. Are they paying living wages? Are they providing benefits? We are a unionized, and I'm proud to be a part of a unionized agency. And we have a collective bargaining agreement that by law spells out who operates public transit service in our operating area. That's ATU Local 192 for us. And then the third factor is we use federally funded, public taxpayer funded resources. So any system we operate has to be open to the public. There's FTA regulations that actually prevent contracted service, if you will. Charter service is what we call it. So I will tell you, I have tried to do it at another agency with the provision that it has to be open to the entire riding public. And typically the cost for the public transit agency to do it is so prohibitive that it hasn't worked out. With that said, I would prefer to see the dollars that really megatech industry spends on private shuttles be funneled towards increased public transit service.
Thank you. And for those that are less familiar with the Easy Pass program, Nichelle, can you just summarize what the Easy Pass program is?
Sure, the general manager did a great job of doing that summary, but it is, I think I mentioned at the top of the hour, a very discounted annual pass program for employers, residential communities, and 2- and 4-year colleges within the AC Transit service area. We work with those entities to determine a participant pool, and it's a very low annual cost. So the participants don't necessarily have to pay for the program. The clients, in this case, like a business, would pay for the program. A business should think of it as a benefit like healthcare or pension plans or 401ks. It is another benefit to employees to reduce single occupancy vehicles and encourage public transit use. It's easier to do that if there's already a pass in someone's pocket than if they have to go through the difficulty of trying to navigate the system by themselves. We also will create a lot of opportunities to encourage usage with employees at the worksite, and we work with businesses to help increase ridership there. So we definitely encourage you to go to actransit.org/EasyPass, find out more about our program and reach out to our EasyPass team, and we will be really excited to come meet any business and show them what the EasyPass program is all about.
Thank you, Nichelle Lanes. This is a question for Chris Andrzejczyk. Will all the bus lines return to full service by August 22nd?
Thank you, Beverly. This is Chris Andrzejczyk, CFO. Unfortunately, no, all of our bus lines are not going to be returning to service this coming August. We are returning supplementary school service for the coming school year, along with some other small amount of service as we build our way back up. As the general manager had mentioned before, one of our big restrictions is on the amount of operators, and we currently don't have enough operators to be able to put back out all the service that we had pre-pandemic. So we are mightily trying to recruit.
Thank you, Chris Abderchak. Now let's open up the floor to those calling into the Zoom phone lines. We'll take 2 questions from the phone lines. Tammy will assist with releasing the first caller so he or she can unmute and ask their questions. Tammy?
We have no phone callers with questions at this time.
Thank you, Tammy Kylo. Now we will take 2 questions from the Spanish phone line.
Good evening. We have no questions from the Spanish phone line.
Thank you, Chantel Reynolds. Now we will take 2 questions from the Chinese phone line.
Good evening. There are no questions on the Chinese phone line tonight.
Thank you, Stephen Jones. It looks like we have a little bit more time, so we will go back to the Q&A section. So let's see here. This is actually a question for planning. And this is similar to the question about the split in the 98-90 route. That's the question about the split in the 51A, 51B route. Why the doubling of the cost for both of those routes, as well as others across the Alameda and Contra Costa counties, when each of those routes is exactly the same distance as it was before the numbers were split? Michael Escherman?
That's a great question. Michael Eshelman, Service Planning Manager. So that question goes back to the service changes that we made as part of the what we called AC Go. So Measure BB was passed by Alameda County voters. And so service was increased based on what that measure provided. So as part of that, these lines 90 and 98th, which the 90 and the 98 run along 90th and 98th, generally they serve a lot of other places, but that's kind of where their names come from. In East Oakland. And what we did there is it used to just be the 98. The 90 portion was split off. And what we were trying to do with that particular change, and there's some other changes that we've heard about across the past few years since that was implemented in about 2017. What we were trying to do was increase service and also provide some more direct links between where we saw most of the ridership getting on and off. So where were there breaks and lines where a bunch of people would get on, ride, and then a bunch of people would get off, and a new group of people would get on and then ride. And so what we found was that was kind of the Coliseum BART station with those particular lines. What we also did is we improved the frequency on those 2 lines. And actually those 2 in particular are a big success story from a ridership perspective. We saw productivity and ridership really increase there. And what, those 2 routes in particular serve a number of disadvantaged communities. What we learned was we can really do well by increasing service to disadvantaged communities in particular. And there's a lot of ridership that will come to lines as you increase frequency there.
Thank you, Michael Escherman. And one more question for you. And that question has to do with a line that goes
Is this the
down.
line 217 question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. So yeah, with BART's recent expansion down to Berryessa, they built 2 new stations, one in Milpitas, one in Berryessa. We used to have line 217 that went down into Santa Clara County and ended at the Great Mall. But the Milpitas station is right essentially next to the Great Mall. So with that opening of that station, AC Transit actually coordinated extending line 217 into the bus transit center that's immediately next to the Milpitas Transit Center. So that change has already actually been made. So the question was, will the 217 bus line continue to Milpitas BART, even though it's in Santa Clara County? And the answer is yes, it's already doing it.
Thank you, Michael Escherman. At this time, we are going to ask for some final comments from our board directors, as it is 7:22 p.m. and we want to make sure that we end on time. First, I will ask for some comments from Board Director Diane Shaw, and then I will ask for closing comments from Board Director Chris Peoples. Director Shaw.
Thank you, Beverly. So first, I want to say thank you to everyone for your valuable feedback. I also want to mention that if you don't feel that you got the answer to your questions or would like a further detailed question, I encourage you to send an email to talks@actransit.org, because it's important for us to hear from you, and we want to make sure that we were able to really answer your questions. Listening to the comments and seeing some of the questions, I also just wanted to mention that, my priorities moving forward really is about understanding more about how we can serve the riders of our area, improving the user experience for AC Transit, and then being creative on how we can provide some mobility services to this area. So I have an open door policy and hope that you will all reach out to me if I can ever be of service, and maybe I'll even see you on the bus one of these days, and feel free to introduce yourself. Thank you very much for your time. Director Peoples.
Thank you, Diane. I want to thank everyone who came tonight for coming and for participating in our polls. Those are really useful for our planning folks to figure out what you're going to be doing. Everybody's sort of trying to look at their crystal ball, but I think that's a very useful thing. Let me make a couple of comments. One is, as General Manager Hurst and a number of the other speakers said, we are actively recruiting, particularly bus operators, but also for other positions. And so I would really encourage you to reach out to your networks and let folks know that we are recruiting. I serve as the board's representative on the retirement board. And this is a very good place to work. People retire here after 30 or 40 years of service. We're, one of the last places where you get full medical care for yourself and your family, where you get a defined benefit pension. And so it's a good place to work, and I would encourage you to send people out. And then Robert got replaced by Michael Escherman tonight, but I encourage you to participate in the planning process as we start talking about a new network. That's particularly important down in Fremont and Newark, because Fremont and Newark are growing faster than a number of other parts of our district. The third thing I would add is, for many years, I lived in Oakland and I worked in San Jose, and I tend to do a lot of events with our outreach teams. And so I'm always down there for the Festival of Globe and Art and Wine and all that stuff. And I discovered that I was the one who was always answering the questions of how do you get to San Jose? Because many people in Fremont and Newark commute south rather than commuting north. And so I think the work that Michael Hurst is doing on the Blue Ribbon Committee, and the work that committee is doing to try to unify schedules and have better information is pretty important. And, keep an eye out for the work that's being done by Seamless and by other folks to try to better coordinate all the different transit agencies. But anyway, thank you very much for coming, and I hope to see you on the bus.
Thank you, Director Peoples. At this time, I will ask Christine Hicks to put the PowerPoint slide up that shows how people can contact AC Transit. So, and actually, I think we might have time for one more question before we end. So this is, let's see, this is a question, I think, for Nichelle Lanes. Have you considered reaching out through the Clipper card service to extend your survey of Trans-Bay ridership and seek questions and numbers for adding Trans-Bay routes?
Well, I'll answer part of that, I think. So we partner with MTC on the Clipper program, right? So if we were to use, so I want to be clear about one thing, and I think if I'm hearing this correctly, the data that we receive for Clipper is aggregate data, right? There are privacy concerns that we are sensitive to, and that we ensure that we don't know who individual riders are. If we were able to partner with Clipper on sort of reaching out to their customer base and doing some surveying, that may be a possibility we can explore, but it definitely would be voluntary and opt-in on the part of those customers, those Clipper customers. We certainly don't have any information on the customer base.
Thank you, Nichelle Lanes. And thank you to our audience for joining us this evening for Transit Talks. We appreciate you taking the time. For those of you on Zoom, you will have the opportunity to take a satisfaction survey upon leaving the Zoom. We encourage you all to please stay engaged with us and send us your comments or feedback via any of the following methods. You can go to visit actransit.org/talks. You can email to talks@actransit.org. You can phone in and leave comments on the English, Chinese, or Spanish lines. You can also use our TDD service, and you can also mail to AC Transit at the general offices at 1600 Franklin Street in Oakland. Thank you. Our next and final Transit Talks will be on Thursday, May 13th at 6 p.m. with Board Directors Javanka Beckles and Director-at-Large Chris Peoples, covering West Contra Costa County, which includes Richmond, North Richmond, San Pablo, El Cerrito, Albany, Berkeley, Kensington, El Sobrante. For those of you on the Zoom webcast, please take a moment to take the exit survey. Thank you and good night to everyone.